What if the very foundations of America's wealth were built not on dreams, but on manipulation, blood, and shadowy deals? What if, behind the shining skyscrapers and booming industries, there lurked a handful of men who ruled not with crowns, but with contracts, stock shares, and steel? They were hailed as visionaries, condemned as villains. Some called them geniuses of capitalism. Others, the greatest thieves in history. These were the men who bent the law, broke their rivals, and reshaped the American economy with a single stroke of a pen. But who were they really? What secrets did they hide behind the golden doors of their mansions? How far would they go to protect their empires? And at what cost did they build their kingdoms? This is not just the story of money. It's the story of power, betrayal, ambition, and the rise of America's most feared industrial warlords. Welcome to the world of the robber barons, where fortune was forged in fire and the price of progress was paid in blood. It began with a barrel of oil, and a man who saw more than fuel. He saw domination. In the quiet city of Cleveland, Ohio, a young man walked with the calm precision of a preacher and the cold calculation of a chess master. His name, John D. Rockefeller, a devout Baptist with a ledger book always in reach and a soul forged in frugality. But behind those steely gray eyes burned something deeper, an obsession. He didn't want to drill for oil like the reckless wildcatters in Pennsylvania. No, Rockefeller wanted to control it. Every drop, every barrel, every spark that lit a lamp in America. He built Standard Oil not like a company, but like a machine. Efficient, ruthless, unstoppable. Through secret deals with railroads, he crushed his competitors under rates they could never match. He swallowed rival refineries whole, offering either a quiet buyout or complete annihilation. And then he did the unthinkable. He began buying out the barrels themselves, not just the oil, but the wooden containers that carried them. Even that was under his control. The world didn't realize it yet. But a quiet war had begun. And Rockefeller, he was winning without ever firing a shot. By the 1880s, he owned 90% of all oil refining in the United States. But the price of such power, it wasn't just financial, it was moral. Cities burned in protest. Journalists sharpened their pens. And in dark corners of America, people whispered, "What if one man controls the light itself?" He was the richest man in the world, but also the most hated. And the more people tried to dismantle his empire, the more they realized you couldn't cut the head off Standard Oil. It had too many. So who was John D. Rockefeller? A titan of industry? A villain cloaked in business suits and Bibles? Or the man who rewired capitalism forever? The truth is buried in the oil-soaked ledgers of a man who turned black gold into a throne. What does it take to climb from nothing to everything? And once you're at the top, what do you sacrifice to stay there? Born in a one-room cottage in Dunfermline in Scotland, Andrew Carnegie crossed the Atlantic with nothing but dreams and desperation. His family arrived in America poor, hungry, invisible. But young Andrew? He watched, he listened, he learned. From telegraph boy to steel emperor, his rise was nothing short of mythic. By his 30s, Carnegie had built a steel empire so vast, its beams held up the very skeleton of America's cities. He didn't just build bridges, he built destiny. With a single principle: cut costs, slay inefficiency. He revolutionized the steel industry. He controlled the iron mines, the railroads, the furnaces. Vertical integration made him untouchable. But progress, as Carnegie defined it, had a price. In the summer of 1892, in the steel town of Homestead, Pennsylvania, that price was paid in blood. His workers, exhausted, underpaid, voiceless, dared to organize. What followed was not negotiation. It was war. Barbed wire surrounded the mill. Armed guards arrived. Shots were fired. The Homestead strike turned into a battlefield where steel met flesh. and hope turned to horror. And where was Carnegie? Thousands of miles away, vacationing in a castle on a Scottish loch, leaving the crackdown in the iron hands of his ruthless lieutenant, Henry Clay Frick. The world never looked at him the same again. How could a man who championed education, peace, and philanthropy preside over one of the darkest labor conflicts in American history? Was it guilt that drove him in later years to give away over $350 million founding libraries, universities, and peace institutions? Or was it just legacy laundering, a final act in the performance of a man who wore two faces, the humble immigrant, and the industrial emperor who forged an empire of steel, with veins of silence and smoke? So ask yourself, was Andrew Carnegie a builder of dreams, or a breaker of men? The truth, like the steel he shaped, was hardened by fire. He never wore a crown. He didn't need to. His empire was made of rails, steam, and raw, merciless will. Before Rockefeller drilled his first barrel, before Carnegie poured his first mold, there was Cornelius Vanderbilt, the original Titan. Born on Staten Island with barely a formal education, Vanderbilt carved his path through the roaring waters of New York Harbor as a steamboat captain. But sailing ships wasn't enough. He wanted control, not just of the river, but of the rails that would soon carve America into pieces. And once he saw the power of the railroad, he never looked back. They called him the Commodore, a name once fit for a ship captain, now feared in boardrooms across the nation. He didn't compete with rivals. He obliterated them. When others raised their prices, Vanderbilt slashed his, sometimes to nothing, just to crush those who stood in his way. He orchestrated stock wars, takeovers, and buyouts that left once proud businessmen begging at his doorstep. And when the New York Central Railway tried to outwit him by withholding shares, Vanderbilt smirked and uttered one of the coldest lines in American business history. "Gentlemen, you have undertaken to cheat me. I won't sue you. The law takes too long. I'll ruin you." And he did. He didn't just build railroads. He created bloodlines of commerce, connecting east to west, New York to Chicago, and fortune to future. But while passengers marveled at the speed of his trains and the bridges that spanned rivers like iron spiderwebs, few knew the cost beneath the tracks. Broken rivals, crushed competitors, entire towns bankrupted, workers stripped of wages and safety. To Vanderbilt, the world was a chessboard, and he was always 10 moves ahead. Ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. By the time of his death, he was the richest man in America. But here's the question that still lingers, like coal smoke in the wind. Can a man who built a nation's backbone still be considered a robber? Was Cornelius Vanderbilt a pioneer of American progress, or its first true predator? In his wake, he left behind not just railroads, but a blueprint for domination. What if the most powerful man in America never ran for office, never gave public speeches, and never needed a vote to control the nation? In a dimly lit room on Wall Street, beneath the warm glow of a single green-shaded lamp, sat a man with a nose for weakness, and a grip that could strangle an economy. His name, John Pierpont Morgan. His empire, invisible. His weapon, money itself. J.P. Morgan wasn't a king, but when the U.S. Treasury ran dry, it was Morgan, not the president, who saved it. Twice. In 1895, the government teetered on collapse. Gold reserves had plummeted. Panic spread. And then, in an act that stunned the world, Morgan quietly stepped forward and bailed out the United States with $65 million in gold. No vote, no debate, just a single private meeting. And suddenly, America was his debtor. But that was only the beginning. Morgan didn't build factories. He built empires of empires. He merged, manipulated, and molded entire industries like clay. He swallowed railroads like appetizers. He created the nation's first billion-dollar corporation, U.S. Steel. by acquiring Carnegie's empire in a secret, silent deal. And when financial storms gathered in 1907, threatening to drag every bank and every business into the abyss, it wasn't the government that people turned to. It was J.P. Morgan, sitting in his private library handpicking which banks would live and which would die. He was judge, jury, banker of last resort. But behind his imposing presence and nose twisted by rosacea was a terrifying truth. One man held more financial power than Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court combined. Critics whispered that Morgan had become a shadow government, a sovereign of Wall Street. And soon, one man, with a mustache and a war club, decided to strike back. Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster, the hunter of titans. But could the government really break a man who had already bought it? Once? So ask yourself, was J.P. Morgan a savior of capitalism or its dark architect? Did he protect the American economy or own it? The answers are locked in ledgers, etched in contracts, and whispered in corridors where the doors are never opened, unless you already have the key. What happens when a man doesn't just break the rules, but rewrites them in secret ink? He wasn't born into wealth. He didn't build factories or railroads with his own hands. But he became one of the most feared men in America, using nothing but a pen, a whisper, and a lie. His name was Jay Gould. And Wall Street? That was his chessboard. Where others fought with steel and oil, Gould fought with rumors, stocks, and spine-chilling schemes. He was a master of manipulation, the kind of man who could drive prices up with a well-placed leak, and crash a company with a casual glance. His nickname? The Mephistopheles of Wall Street. Not out of jealousy, but because people believed he had no soul. He rigged railroad stocks, cornered gold markets, and made fortunes appear and vanish in the blink of an eye. And in 1869, Gould launched one of the boldest financial heists in American history, Black Friday. Gould and his co-conspirator, James Fisk, quietly bought up vast amounts of gold, inflating prices while bribing government insiders to keep the Federal Reserves untouched. Then, in a single, coordinated strike, they triggered a frenzy. Banks collapsed. Fortunes were destroyed. And when the government finally intervened and dumped gold into the market, the economy buckled. Gould? He walked away rich, untouchable, unapologetic. Politicians raged. The press foamed. But Gould had already rewritten the ending. "I can hire one half of the working class," he once said, "to kill the other half." Was it a threat? A prophecy? Or just another move in the twisted game only he could see? He didn't need armies. He had influence. He didn't need respect. He had results. He was a phantom tycoon. One step ahead, hidden in shadows, always smiling while the system burned. So ask yourself, was Jay Gould a genius of the market, or a financial sociopath who wore profit like a mask? One thing is certain. No one ever played the American dream like Jay Gould, and no one ever broke it so beautifully. What happens when the empire you built starts to crack from the ground beneath your feet? For decades, the robber barons ruled from the shadows, cloaked in smoke, steel, and silence. They built skyscrapers that kissed the clouds. They held gold in their fists like gods, and they moved presidents and parliaments like pawns. But every empire leaves a trail, and behind theirs were broken backs, boarded homes, hungry mouths, and voices that could no longer be ignored. In the steel towns of Pennsylvania, in the tenements of New York, in the cotton mills of the South, the people were rising. Mothers who'd lost their sons to mine collapses. Fathers blackened by soot, coughing up their futures. Children who had never known play, only labor. They marched, they shouted, they burned. Labor unions were born in fire. In whispers passed between factory walls and strikes that shut down cities. Radicals, reformers, journalists, they came with pens, pickets, and purpose. And then came the reckoning. The government, once a loyal hound to the barons, began to turn its gaze. The Sherman Antitrust Act, the Interstate Commerce Commission, trust busting, regulation. Teddy Roosevelt stepped onto the stage, not just as president, but as a hunter of giants. "No man should have more power than the people who build his wealth," he thundered. One by one, the untouchables were put on trial. Standard Oil was smashed. J.P. Morgan was called to testify. Railroads were shattered into pieces. But even as their names vanished from stock tickers, their legacies lingered. In every law carved to stop monopolies. In every labor right fought for with blood. In every whisper of resistance that still echoes in boardrooms today. So ask yourself, were the robber barons punished? Or simply reborn under new names? Did the people win? Or were they simply fed new kings with cleaner crowns? The war between profit and people never ended. It just changed uniforms. They're gone. But are they really? Their names are etched into marble libraries, grand universities, glittering concert halls, sanctuaries of culture funded by fortunes once soaked in soot and sweat. Carnegie Hall, Vanderbilt University, the Morgan Library. They built cathedrals not for gods, but for immortality. Their empires crumbled, but their shadows stretch long into the present. Because here's the truth. The robber barons never truly disappeared. They were reborn. In boardrooms, on screens, behind algorithms. Once it was railroads. Now it's broadband. Once it was oil. Now it's data. Once they controlled steel. Now they control attention. The new barons don't wear top hats. They wear hoodies. They don't build factories. They build platforms. And they don't pay for armies. They own your feeds. Are we freer now, or just more entertained? Are today's tech titans and financial kings visionaries, or simply echoes of the past, disguised as progress? Because when you trace the DNA of modern capitalism, you'll find fingerprints. Rockefeller's ruthlessness, Carnegie's contradictions, Gould's trickery, Morgan's grip, Vanderbilt's power play, hiding in plain sight. They showed the world how to centralize power, how to break rules to reshape reality, how to turn the American dream into a private vault. And we, knowingly or not, still play by their rules. So ask yourself, are we living in the future, or just inside the blueprint they left behind? History doesn't end. It mutates. It reinvents its kings. It buries its victims under monuments made of gold and memory. And now, it's your turn to choose. Will you follow their path, or break it? As we close the pages of this chapter on the robber barons, one question lingers in the air like the smoke from a forgotten factory. What legacy do they leave behind? In their rise, they reshaped the world, but at what cost? In their fall, they left behind lessons and warnings, whispers of ambition and greed echoing through time. The men who built empires with iron, steel, and gold may have vanished from the headlines, but their shadows still stretch across the modern world. They laid the foundation for the corporate titans of today. And in that foundation, we must ask, is the world they created still ours to control, or are we merely its inheritors? As you walk away from this tale, remember, the story of the robber barons is not just a chapter from the past. It's the blueprint for a future that is yet to unfold. And in the echoes of their ambition, you might just hear the rumblings of the next great empire, or its fall. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep searching for the untold truths that lie beneath the surface. Because the past never truly ends. It's always there, waiting to be uncovered.